Before you finalized the name of your characters, were there any names that you had before you finalized the names of your characters?
Yeah, characters often go through multiple name changes before you decide what they're going to be. In fact, this was originally Lil before I decided that that was too old-fashioned name, shelved it, used it later. And Clary was originally Valerie until Holly beat me to it with Valiant and wrote a book about a girl named Valerie, and whose name was in the title, so I was like, well, that's not gonna happen. So I mean, characters do go through name changes until you kind of settle on the name that, like, you know, feels right. Feels like sort of the right skin for the character to wear. I think that's normal.
I feel like the one thing, you know, you're talking about the song being the most important thing. Like for me, it's a name. If I don't have the name right, I can't write the book. And I just feel stuck, and I go over and over and over, and if something feels wrong until I get the name.
I feel the same way as Holly. A name is the character. A character is defined a lot by their name. I am maybe biased because I changed my name legally when I was 16 to Margaret, and so because I did not feel like I identified with my name. What was my name?
We all want to know.
So my maiden name was Hummel, like the little cute figurines. My first name, back when I wore black all the time and told people I was mourning the death of modern society, was Heidi. I was Heidi Hummel. Anyway, so I changed my name legally. And so for me, my characters have to match their name. And so it's very difficult to change them. During the editing process of Shiver, someone came to me at the publishing house and said, well, actually, there is a Sam who is a werewolf in the Twilight series, so you're going to change his name. And I was like, no, there's no Sam. And they're like, yeah, there's a Sam. And that's when the movie was coming out. And there was the big ad that said, Sam, suddenly huge character, Stiefvater screwed, you know, the headline. And so I tried for days trying to figure out a new name, but it felt like I was writing a new person. I couldn't actually do it. And so I took a different tack. I actually read all the werewolf books I could find and highlighted the Sams in them. And then I sent the list to my publisher, and they're like, fine. Look, really, you're more likely to be a werewolf if your name is Sam.
Hey guys, I'm going to say that, like, I love all of you guys, and in your books you guys are all like witty and clever and stuff, but this is more like an opinion kind of question, because I'm kind of writing an article.
Is this like, you're not actually that funny in person?
Well, no, you guys are. But because, like, this is like an opposite of you guys being witty, because I know, like, in your books you have like touches of like really heavy content and stuff. So I was wondering, like, why is a young adult author, like, why do you believe that books that contain heavy content such as the self-harm and suicide you guys were talking about earlier, what makes them popular for young adults in your books? So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that for me, I combine the more heavy and serious content with humor, because I actually feel like that is the way that in real life we deal with things that are tragic and things that are difficult, is we leaven them with humor. I mean, we laugh in the hospital, and we laugh at funerals, and we laugh at the terrible things that happen to us in life because we have to. And so, you know, we leaven the, you know, heaviness and seriousness of things that happen in books with humor and wit. I mean, some of the characters use it as a defense mechanism and a deflection, but, you know, I also think that, like, you know, just even having a funny scene that breaks up the tension of what's going on is a completely normal way that people behave. And so, you know, I like to see that reflected in books.
Yes.
Also, we mind bad things in YA because without bad things, there is no story. There isn't. It's a punchline without a joke. So the funniness would be pointless if there wasn't the darkness to start out with. No one actually wants to read a book that has nothing bad that happens into it. And as far as how dark we go, it's just because we are writing about real life, and teens go through the same crap that everyone else goes through.
I mean, some of the darkest books in the world are also incredibly funny. You know, you can write a completely bleak and tragic and yet also funny book, because humor and tragedy really are, like, you know, it's like the comedy and tragedy masks. They're the half of the each other that make one whole thing.
Like if you wrote this kind of funny book about 2 kids who had cancer that were dying.
Yeah! Like that. I don't know who would do that.
Thank you guys so much.
Hi, first of all, this is just like totally amazing, so hi. So my question is, when you're writing a relationship, whether it's friendship or, you know, romance, do you always know what you're going to do with them, or does it kind of like develop over time?
There's a lot of things I don't know going into a book. Many things. Sometimes I think I know things, but I don't know those things. And poor Cassie is often the person I call when I say, remember everything I told you about this book? None of it is true now. What do you think I should do? But I always know the personal stuff. The one thing I feel like I know going into it is I know how the people are supposed to relate to one another. Like the story I want to tell about the people. And often that's because what I start with is a feeling. And the thing I want to bring out of the book is that feeling. Sometimes I don't know how, but I always know that bit.
I mean, I'd agree. I do, you know, I mean, my books are very plot heavy. They tend to be. And I would say that Magisterium is no exception. But even in that same way, like I sit down and I think of the characters first, and I often think of what are the kind of relationships that I want to write. Oh, I want to write about best friends who fall in love, and this is how it will go, and this is how it will end. Or, you know, with Clockwork Princess, I thought I kind of want to deconstruct the idea of the love triangle, and the way that they often work in fiction. And so this is how this is going to play out, and this is how it is going to end. So it's rare that I go into a book without, I mean, like we know how all of the relationships in Magisterium play out and how they end. But there's a lot of, but there is still plot stuff that we don't know. But plot comes from the characters. You know, the characters at their growth determine it. So I think that knowing your characters and knowing their relationships and how they're going to play out is really what you want to know when you're starting.
I would say I often know the character, the big points. I just don't know the severity sometimes, or what will cause them. For instance, I'll know that they're going to fight a third of the way through the book, and I'll write a fight, but it'll be over meaningless stakes. I mean, it'll be just a ridiculous fight that has nothing to do with anything, and my critique partners will read it and say, so do you remember that one time, like 2 years ago, when you actually knew how to write books? That time has passed. And but it's because I know that we have a good relationship. Dark with the funny. And so for me, the fight, I'll know that the fight's going to happen there. I don't necessarily know what's going to cause it. So it's always that kind of thing where I'll know with relationships who's going to be friends, who's going to be enemies, who's going to fall in love, who's going to fall out of love. But I don't necessarily know the plot points yet that will actually drive that.
Thank you so much. I love you guys.
Oh, thank you. Hi.
Hi. Okay. So I just wanted to know how in books when you're writing, how you find the balance between useless dialogue and ones that help develop the character. Whenever I'm writing, I'll just be like, hey, are you going to the supermarket? Yeah. I like Whole Foods. I really like my cookies organic.
Trenchant commentary on modern society. I think that for me, and Holly certainly observed this about my writing, I will often write a lot of sort of useless dialogue for my characters because when I'm writing a book, because I'm getting to know them. And that's okay. Like, you're getting to know your characters in the way that they talk and what they say to each other and how they act. And what basically happens is that later you go back and look at it and you go, yeah, all this stuff is useless, and you cut it way down. I mean, I remember there in City of Bones, there's a scene where Jason and Clary talk in the alley outside of a coffee shop, and literally that was like 30 pages of dialogue, and I cut it down to 2. Because the other 28 pages were just Jace being like, I'm a shadow hunter, I have very conflicted feelings about my dead father and also my destiny, which seems to me to be like that it might be complicated. I find you attractive, but I don't know how I feel about that. And more stuff about me. And so Holly was like, well, yeah, you should probably cut a bunch of this, and also, these characters kind of ping pong between different emotions and whatnot. But for me, it was all like I had to write all this stuff down so that I would get to know this character, and they would kind of tell me who they were, and I went back and took all that stuff out.
I think that, yes, cutting things down often is a game. Like often you wind up overwriting that kind of stuff and cutting it down. But I also would say, try and make sure your scenes do two things, so that they're doing, for your story. They're advancing both character and plot in some way. They're advancing two different character things. Like try and think about what is this scene for, and what are and also like how can I up the tension? How can I up the stakes? How can I put more pressure on these people so that their dialogue will have stuff to spark off of? I think sometimes sometimes we are in a situation where we write hoping that stuff will happen naturally, and sometimes it does. But if it doesn't, you're gonna have to go back and put the thumb screws to these people.
I kind of want to end right there, but for me, I found that I used to write lots and lots of useless dialogue and scenes because I wrote scenes that I thought needed to happen. To make the plot make sense, I would go through and say, I need a connecting scene where they get from point A to point B, and I have learned now that if I do not want a scene, if I reread it and I'm bored, it's gone. It doesn't matter, everything in it was useless. Likewise, if I can find a scene and I love it, and I can't think of a purpose for it, I will find a purpose for it. There's an entire scene in Dream Thieves that my editor was extremely unsure about. Two of the boys are talking about pigeons. They call one of their friends, and the professor is at a pigeon show, and he just spends a lot of time talking about pigeons. And really, does the scene move the plot forward? No, but I'm going to pretend that really forwards their character. You learned a lot about those two boys and pigeons at the same time. And I feel like a lot of times, pigeons, boys. And I just think you should write a book that you want to read. And if you're reading it and you don't quite understand why you want to read a scene, but you love it, a better option than cutting it is to find a way to make other people love it too. I don't really believe in the line, kill your darlings.
Even if it's 30 pages?
Did you love all of that? No. You had to write it, but at the end, did you love it all? Scene.
Thank you, and thanks for Will Harris.
Oh, you're welcome for Will Harris. I'll let you know if he's ever available.
Thank you. Thank all of you guys. We're just going to take one more question because we're wrapping up, but everyone loves everyone. Yay!
All right, first of all, I adore your matching outfits. I'm sorry, this is for Cassie, this is a question for you. I'm sorry, I love you guys.
No, you don't really. It's okay, you don't have to say that.
I see a lot of copies of City of Heavenly Fire out there, so I wanted to ask, not actually about that, sorry. I wanted to ask, how do you feel, Cass, that you have this beautiful world, and it's, as you have said yourself, it's very malleable. How do you feel about stretching it into 2 more series? Like, how is that going to go? Because we're very excited.
I feel really excited about it because one of the things about the world, like when I originally built it, I built it to be like a really big world, that spans the globe, that has this 1,000-year history, that I felt like I could expand into just countless stories if I wanted to. And so I'm really excited because of what happens at, I don't want to spoil City of Heavenly Fire, but of what happens at the end of City of Heavenly Fire really changes the way that the Shadowhunters relate to Downworlders. They make a very significant decision that's going to affect a huge amount of things going forward, and the Shadowhunter world is really going to change, and I'm really excited about writing the changing of the Shadowhunter world. And for Last Hours, of course, it's a retelling of Great Expectations, which is one of my favorite books, and I'm really looking forward to kind of to seeing the characters from Infernal Devices as adults, which I think is, a really exciting kind of way to revisit characters, is to see them grown up, and also to write about their kids. So everybody is running away because they hate me. So I'm just kidding. But I know they're getting books. I'm just making fun of them. I'm making fun of them. But the idea for the Shadowhunter world as a whole was 5 connected series. So we've got the Moral Instruments and Infernal Devices. There'll be the Last Hours and the Dark Artifices. Hopefully, if everything goes well, we'll end with the Wicked Powers, which will be the book that changes the Shadowhunter world completely and forever. And I'm really excited about that, even though it's years in the future. So I'm really excited.